U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce. Now we move on to Middle East. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has stated that Washington does not see Israel's Saturday strike on Gaza as a violation of the U.S.-brokered ceasefire with Hamas. The strike targeted a Palestinian Islamic Jihad operative whom Israel said was planning an imminent attack. Palestinian media reported one person was killed and others injured in the strike. Rubio has spoke aboard U.S. President Donald Trump's plane during his Asia tour. He has emphasized that Israel retains the right to self-defense under the ceasefire. He further stated that Israel has the right if there is an imminent threat to them. Rubio also called on Hamas to speed up the return of dead hostages remains. Israel maintains such actions are permitted under the truce, though Hamas calls them violations. Now for this discussion, we welcome Jordan Cope. He's a Middle East expert, joins us live from Dallas. Thank you very much, Jordan, for joining us again. Good to see you. Jordan, does Washington's refusal to condemn Israel's strike on Gaza reveal a double standard in how U.S. applies international law and ceasefire agreements, or is the U.S. prioritizing its political alliance with Israel?
I think the outlook is skewed. In fact, Israel and the United States, before conducting airstrikes, refer to their legal counsels to ensure that such airstrikes are within the realm of the laws of armed conflict. And certainly in this case, it does appear that the Islamic Jihad official who was targeted was in fact in the final preparation stages of launching an attack. And these attacks shouldn't be dismissed. One must remember that 2 Israeli soldiers were already killed in trying to preserve the ceasefire that is currently in place and its conditions. And Israel still has tried to maintain the conditions of the ceasefire, even though Hamas has violated the Trump peace plan on multiple occasions and in material ways, whether it be through withholding hostages that should have been returned in a timely manner, which Hamas and other factions in the Gaza Strip have failed to conform with, and or other conditions along the way. And it should be noted that the Trump peace plan, ultimately the parties who are suspect and who are binded to the peace deal do not actually include the Islamic Jihad, but rather Israel and Hamas. Israel should not have to forfeit its right to self-defense, especially in terms of preserving this peace deal, which leaves Israeli soldiers often as sitting ducks and very vulnerable, knowing that they're dealing with irrational actors who have no respect for international law.
And going back to bringing U.S. into this, is U.S. prioritizing its political alliance with Israel over its responsibility to act as a mediator or impartial mediator in between Hamas and Israel?
I think the assessment which the question poses is off. Israel and the United States do have differences when it comes to this peace deal. There are many in Israel who disagree with many aspects of this deal, and many in Israel do eventually wish to deal with the threat that is Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And even though the United States at times has made clear that if Hamas doesn't follow through with the implementation of the peace deal, that Israel will have a right to return and ensure that Hamas is disarmed, a material condition that Hamas has made clear that it refuses to comply with. The United States, though, and Israel, in essence, ultimately do have disagreements in terms of how they will see this deal ultimately implemented and enforced. And so to suggest that the United States ultimately has some political agenda that is so pro-Israel, while the United States, behind the scenes, seemingly has been trying to restrain Israel in its right at this point, given Hamas's violation of the deal, to respond with appropriate force to the Hamas threat, it is a skewed assessment, in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Jordan, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. Israel has stated that it had allowed a team, including Red Cross staff, Egyptian rescuers, and a Hamas member to search for the bodies of the deceased hostages in Gaza. The Israeli government has stated that the teams have been permitted to search beyond the yellow line in the area controlled by the Israel Defense Forces in Gaza. Shosh Bedrojan has reacted to the situation. Let's listen in.
Red Cross, the Egyptian technical team, and a Hamas person have also been permitted to enter beyond the IDF's yellow line position in Gaza under close IDF supervision to identify the location of our hostages.
Earlier, Hamas has transferred 15 out of 28 deceased Israeli hostages under the first phase of U.S.-brokered ceasefire deal, which requires it to hand over all hostage bodies. The U.S. President Donald Trump has warned Hamas to start returning the bodies quickly, or the other countries involved in this great peace will take action. Now, for this discussion, we go back to Jordan Cope. He's a Middle East expert, joins us live from Dallas. Thank you very much, Jordan, for staying with us. Now,
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, looking at this, can you say that Israeli hostages' bodies have not returned yet, but the phase 2 discussions are on way? What is your analysis over this current situation of phase 1 and moving to phase 2?
It's very possible we will not see a phase 2 in terms of the implementation, given Hamas's material breaches of Trump's peace plan. Ultimately, one of the foremost material conditions is that which provides Hamas's disarmament and removal from the Gaza Strip. Hamas has made very clear that it has no intention to disarm or to leave the Gaza Strip in the long term. And Donald Trump has had to make threat time and time again that if Hamas does not follow through with the implementation and enforcement of the peace deal, the United States might actually have to, and I quote, kill Hamas members in the Gaza Strip, whatever that actually means. Now, when it comes to the 13 deceased hostages that remain in the Gaza Strip, Israel supposedly knows where 9 of them exist, which means that Hamas surely knows that at least 9, and most likely all 13 deceased corpses, Hamas likely knows where they all exist. And the fact that Hamas continues to drag this out is ultimately a gesture on its part to show that it is still in control of the Gaza Strip, that it has no intention of leaving, and that has no intention of fully abiding by the peace plan, including the material condition that it disarm and leave the Gaza Strip. And so Hamas also has tried to push the boundaries, literally, arguing that it needs to be beyond the yellow line in the Gaza Strip to retrieve the bodies where it supposedly believes they are located. Now, there is a chance that some of the bodies might be located beyond the ceasefire line. However, more likely, it is an effort by Hamas to extend its presence beyond the agreed-upon ceasefire lines currently in place. And on top of all of this, Hamas is now asking for heavy-duty equipment to supposedly be able to retrieve the bodies. In essence, Hamas is making very clear that it doesn't plan on disarming, but it does want the necessary construction and engineering materials to rebuild the Gaza Strip before it plans on actually abiding by any of the conditions of the ceasefire.
But Jordan, don't you think they need to move the rubbles off of the deceased bodies? Isn't that why Hamas is needing of those bulldozers or excavators?
It's possibly the case, but based on the totality of the circumstances, Hamas's refusal to comport, conform, and comply with the foremost material conditions of the Trump's peace plan, it's very unlikely that that Hamas, a completely irrational actor with no regard for agreements or international law, reminding you that they violated ceasefire agreements for time immemorial, not just during this war, but in wars past. Hamas has no intention of leaving the Gaza Strip. It has no intention of surrendering power, and it's using every opportunity it can, as I once said earlier, to literally push the boundaries, to restore its presence all throughout the Gaza Strip, and perhaps even to prepare itself for future war with Israel. So one must remain very skeptical. And it is true that some bodies might be located under rubble, and the Red Cross is currently working with Hamas to locate the remains of the 13 deceased hostages. But what that effect also has, in a way, is legitimizing Hamas's presence and rule in the Gaza Strip by demonstrating a presence of a somewhat respected international institution working with Hamas, even though it has deservedly lost much respect throughout this war for its refusal to engage with the hostages in the Gaza Strip and their families as sufficiently necessary.
With that, I would like to thank Jordan Cope for joining us and sharing that insight as a Middle East expert from Dallas. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Africa. Armed men opened fire on protesters outside the home of Cameroonian opposition leader Issa Chiroma Bakary in Garoua. The violence came after President Paul Biya was declared the winner of the October 12th election. Chiroma rejected the results and has said that 2 people were killed in the shooting. Though it is unclear who fired the shots, protesters have clashed repeatedly with security forces over the past week. Biya, who is 92 years old, secured an 8th term with 53.66% of the vote. Opposition supporters and security forces remain on high alert across the country. Let's listen in to some of the protesters.
Le peuple camerounais, la jeunesse camerounaise réclame sa victoire en majorité. On sait tous que le Cameroun, le peuple, ont voté en majorité pour Issa Chiroma Bakary. Il est inadmissible qu'on retrouve que le président Paul Biya a gagné dans certaines zones en guerre.
Le Cameroun a une très bonne image à l'extérieur. Je ne comprends pas pourquoi est-ce qu'une personne va prendre le pouvoir et s'accaparer de ça comme si c'était pour sa famille. Le Cameroun, ce n'est pas un royaume. Le Cameroun, c'est un pays béni, un très beau pays, un pays respecté par tous et de tous. Alors on se doit de préserver l'image du Cameroun, quel que soit le prix que cela doit nous coûter.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.